Welcome to the podcast of the Political Page blog with commentary from an attorney and entrepreneur on the political and social issues of the day, from a rationalist, libertarian, and often irreverent perspective. This is Political Page, and here's what's on my mind today. Welcome back to the blog. This is April 8th, 2019, and the blog subject is Mr. Miller is lighting his arrows. For those of you who are under a rock somewhere, Kirstjen Nielsen, the Director of Homeland Security, has abruptly resigned. Well, she resigned, or she was sort of quietly fired or told to resign, or it was a mutually agreed, let's just go our separate ways, whatever, she's out. Now this has created quite the kerfluffle among the terminally offended press, because they suddenly seem to wish that the woman they have excoriated as both cruel and incompetent for 2 full years should perhaps remain in her position, despite the fact that, like the gingerbread witch in Hansel and Gretel, she purportedly glories in locking children in cages. Now, why would they suddenly look somewhat fondly upon the good old days when somebody inhumane and toxic ran border security? Because it appears that the resignation is so that somebody tougher can take the job. Boy, be careful, what you wish for has never rung so true, has it? Now, this is gross hypocrisy. That goes without saying. These are Democrats. The children locked in cages started with the Obama-era laws and court rulings that resulted in separating children from adult illegal aliens at the border. So they're not mixed in with the adult population, which consists primarily of military-aged males and also includes, human smuggling coyotes, MS-13 gang members, drug cartel thugs, and of course, the much-vaunted patriots just looking for a better life. Now, Obama separated those children, and in fact, if you look at it, most of the pictures that are so terrifying of these children behind wired meshes, they all came from the Obama era, when he was separating the kids, but there weren't any facilities for them yet. Not really his fault, but it's just really funny they use those pictures to get at Trump. Anyway, he separated the children and would eventually just release them with whoever came in with them. It's now become known that a lot of people who come in with them are not their parents. The kids are given to different adults so that they can get advantage of certain positive family-friendly immigration rules. Trump separates them and tries to release them only to confirmed family members. Of course, it doesn't matter, does it? Obama was compassionate and Trump is a monster, and this is known. Now, as an aside, imagine for just a second the outcry. Should we ever put one of these children in with that adult population and the kid gets raped or abused or killed or something horrible happens to them? Do you think the media would then excuse the administration because they didn't separate the kid? Yeah, dream on, baby. Oh, well, it hardly matters. This is the way it is with every single border issue, isn't it? I mean, demagoguery has never sprouted in such a fertile field. Securing the border is racist. Borders are necessary for a sovereign country. Walls are effective. Walls are anathema. Children must be protected from traffickers. Children can't be separated from adults. There's a horrific humanitarian crisis on the border. There isn't any crisis. Illegals just want to assimilate. Assimilation is racist. We're a melting pot. No, we're a freaking salad. That's just a smattering of the rhetorical paradoxes from a single party, the Democrats. Oh, listen, policies of various administrations aside, even in this insane environment of bitter reactionism, everybody not currently glued to a genital beanie knows that the situation at the border is a freaking disaster. It is a disaster of emergent proportions. It's an emergency. Which brings us back around to poor Kirstjen Nielsen and her precipitous removal from her post as the head of DHS. Ms. Nielsen is being removed because she can't get the southern border under control. But to her credit, when she took that post, she stepped into this mire, this stinking bureaucratic morass. And the Democrats use that bureaucracy, man. They use it very, very well. It is a self-feeding muck of entitled and overpaid workers, hidebound processes, and stubborn recalcitrants. They use it as their electoral playground because they scrub the backs of the lazy bureaucrats who enjoy the benefits of the labyrinthine worker protections that they negotiate with the very Democrats that they funded to re-election. Even FDR said that was going to be a bad idea, and he never met a union he didn't like. Anyway, wrenching that cesspit of immutable incompetence into anything resembling efficacy is an uphill battle if there ever was one. You gotta feel sorry for the woman. But that said, Nielsen was timid. She made almost no attempt to break her department out from under the creaking and raging pattern of government ineptitude, the one that we citizens only see when we have to go to the Social Security office or maybe a blue state DMV. She just accepted this maze of insanity as inevitable. She dutifully trotted along its paths like a tame rodent in a no-win lab experiment. In short, she did not stir the pot. Enter a little-known aide to the president, Mr. Stephen Miller. Now, Mr. Miller is what is known to the dithering ninnies in the mainstream press as what they call a, quote, hardliner. What's that mean? It means he insists on applying private sector expectations of achievement and private sector systems of efficiency and accountability to the Leviathan bureaucracy. And, this is truly unforgivable, he refuses to give lip service to the politically correct platitudes when he's interviewed. You can just go onto YouTube and you can Google him and his interviews, and boy, they get heated. But unless you're a political junkie, your main exposure to Mr. Miller is something you probably didn't even associate with his name. He wrote the State of the Union address given by the president in 2018. It was pretty good, wasn't it? Man's smart. He's only 33 years old. Anyway, Mr. Miller has been upsetting the bureaucratic apple cart right and left. Not to make the pun. Politico, now you know Politico, right? It's become a reliable left-wing apologist for any progressive idiocy that bubbles up to the surface of the swamp. And it recently wailed, and I gotta quote it, quote, "The officials of the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, and State who handled different parts of the immigration process were initially surprised that a high-ranking White House official like Mr. Miller would call them directly rather than contact their bosses." Whoa, what, really? You mean this man actually directly contacted somebody, an official in charge of the immigration policy? At DHS, DOJ, DOS, don't they love their acronyms? Can he do that? Can he do that? You know, there's an old Far Side comic in which the surrounded settlers with their covered wagons are looking askance at the Indians, Native Americans circling them on horses. One of them looks at the other and says they're lighting their arrows. Can they do that? Well, apparently not. Here's another quote for you. "It's intimidation," bleated one deeply offended bureaucrat. "Anytime you get a call like this from the White House, it's intimidation." Wait a minute. Don't the officials at DHS, DOJ, DOS, whatever acronym, don't they work for the executive branch? I mean, isn't the guy in the White House their boss? And since when, in any organization that you've ever been involved with, unless you're a government worker, in which case you're not listening to this, when is it intimidation for your boss to ask you why his directive is being ignored? Oh, that's a trick question. Of course it is. Bureaucratic rats that slip through their tortuous cubicled little mazes of bloated officialdom are accustomed to being protected. They have layer upon layer upon layer of cumbersome, I would say Machiavellian regulations. In one manifest example, the Director of Personal Management, OPM, it's an acronym, once listed on a single sheet of paper every regulatory hurdle to fire a federal employee for doing something wrong on the job. The list is 30 feet long, and it's grown since then. These people don't answer to anybody, or more precisely, they do. They answer to a supervisor who answers to a supervisor, who answers to an assistant to the deputy director, who answers to the deputy director, who answers to the director, who might have to talk to a presidential aide if it's not a federal holiday, scheduled vacation, maternity or paternity leave, sick day, or a personal day, or unless it rains. Oh man, it's no wonder poor Ms. Nielsen got lost in there. You know, reports are that she was extremely frustrated at her own inability to get cooperation from any of these other acronyms in stemming this massive, unrestricted flood of illegals across the southern border. But she made a mistake because her solution to not getting anything done in the U.S. bureaucracy was to turn to the UN and ask them to help us solve the crisis. That is somewhat of a startling solution because, honestly, not only is it totally useless, but it might be indicative of a brain lesion. If you're stymied by the bureaucracy, you don't call the UN. Anyway, Nielsen has been temporarily replaced by a guy who's not particularly ideological, but he's a placeholder. And his ultimate successor is going to be picked by Donald Trump with a lot of advice from Stephen Miller. Now, just one final thing to thicken the plot. At the same time that Trump accepted Nielsen's resignation, he also withdrew this pending nomination of a guy named Ronald Vitiello to be the ICE director. And he did that as he expressed a desire to move to a more tougher immigration position. That 1-2 combination of withdrawals has given the immigration bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. an unfamiliar state of existential angst, as does the unthinkable telephone inquiries from the White House to various bureaucratic cogs asking what the hell is going on the southern border. The horror. It appears that Mr. Miller is lighting his arrows. Thank you for tuning in to the Political Page podcast today. Original blog articles, complete with a lot more information and great links to original source material, can be found anytime on politicalpage.net. That's political, P-A-I-G-E.net.